Jake Diesel Harris had been driving since sunrise, chewing on sunflower seeds and bad memories. The desert highway stretched for miles, a ribbon of cracked asphalt running through nowhere. His rig, a rusty red Kenworth that had seen better decades, rumbled like an old warhorse. In the passenger seat sat his thermos, an empty pack of smokes, and a Bible he hadn't opened in years. He hadn't planned to stop that day. He was hauling refrigerator parts from Phoenix to Amarillo, and the delivery window was tight. But when the temperature gauge climbed into the red and the air conditioning started coughing hot air, Jake muttered a curse and pulled over onto the shoulder. He climbed out, boots crunching on gravel, sweat already sticking to his shirt. The desert wind hit him like a blow-dryer. He popped the hood and stared at the steaming engine. The radiator hose had split clean open. "Perfect," he grumbled. He kicked the tire for good measure, then looked around. Nothing but sand, rocks, and sky. That's when he saw the man. About 100 yards down the road, a figure was walking slowly along the shoulder. Barefoot. Wearing what looked like a long, sun-bleached robe. The heat shimmer made him look almost ghostly. Jake squinted. Nobody walked out here. You'd dehydrate in an hour. He grabbed a bottle of water from his cab and started waving. "Hey, you okay, buddy?" he called out. The man lifted his head and began walking toward him, calm and steady. As he got closer, Jake noticed something strange. His feet weren't blistered or dusty, even though the asphalt was hot enough to fry bacon. His face was peaceful, like he'd slept through every worry Jake had ever known. And his eyes, light brown, almost golden, seemed to look straight through him. When the man reached him, Jake offered the bottle. "You look like you could use this." The stranger smiled gently. "Thank you, my son," he said. His voice was soft, but it carried through the air like music. "I've walked far today." Jake chuckled nervously. "You sure have. You lost. I can give you a lift when I get this thing patched up." The man nodded, took the bottle, and drank slowly, like each sip meant something. "Water," he murmured. "The simplest gift, and the greatest." Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, well, it's the least I can do. You from around here?" The man looked up at the blazing sky. "I come from everywhere, and nowhere. I walk where hearts are dry." Jake frowned. "Okay, poet, huh?" The man smiled again. "Tell me, Jake Harris, why do you run so fast from the silence?" Jake froze. "How do you know my name?" The man didn't answer. He just stared at him, eyes calm, patient. Jake felt an odd warmth spread through his chest, part awe, part fear. "Okay, this is weird," Jake muttered. "Look, I don't know who you are, but I don't like games." The man stepped closer. "Do you remember the day your father died on this road?" Jake's breath caught. The air seemed to vanish from his lungs. He hadn't told anyone about that, about how his old man had crashed his rig 20 years ago not far from here. Jake had been 16, waiting at home with his mother when the sheriff knocked on their door. "How do you know about that?" Jake whispered. "I was there," the man said softly. He asked for forgiveness in his final breath. "And it was given." Jake stumbled back a step. Who are you?" The stranger's gaze didn't waver. "You already know." The wind picked up, carrying sand across the highway. The man's robe fluttered, but his hair didn't move. The air around him shimmered, not with heat, but with something alive. Jake's knees went weak. "Jesus," he breathed. The man nodded once. "You called, and I came." Jake shook his head, blinking rapidly. No. This is heatstroke or something. I haven't called anyone. You called in your heart," the man interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Last night, when you said you couldn't take another mile, that you'd rather the road end than face another dawn." Jake's throat closed. He had said that. Sitting in a truck stop outside Tucson, drunk on regret and caffeine, staring at the steering wheel, whispering to the empty cab, "God, if you're out there, I can't keep doing this." He swallowed hard. "I didn't mean it." The man smiled faintly. "You did. And that is why I'm here." The desert fell silent. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. Jake's mind raced. Maybe he was hallucinating. Maybe dehydration was frying his brain. But then he looked again, really looked, and every instinct in his body told him this was no ordinary man. There was no shadow under his feet. The air seemed to glow faintly around him. The world felt awake. "What do you want from me?" Jake asked finally. The man tilted his head. "To remind you who you are. And to ask you something." Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "Ask me what?" The man's eyes softened. "Would you give me water again, if you knew who I am?" Jake blinked. "What?" The man gestured to the bottle in his hand. "Many have passed me by when I thirsted. Some saw only a beggar. Some saw only a fool. But you stopped. You gave freely. That is the start of love." Jake stared at him, the words washing over him like rain on dry soil. "You think too much about what you've lost," the man continued. "Your wife, your father, your home. You drive to outrun your ghosts. But they ride beside you." Jake looked down. His hands were shaking. "How do I stop?" The man stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. It felt warm, so warm it almost burned, but it didn't hurt. "Start by forgiving yourself." Tears welled in Jake's eyes, sudden and sharp. "For what?" "For living when others didn't," the man said simply. "And for forgetting that you were never alone." Jake's chest trembled. He turned his head away, but the tears spilled anyway. The man let him cry. No judgment. No impatience. Just silence and wind. When Jake finally looked up again, the man smiled, eyes shining with something ancient and kind. "Rest now, Jake Harris. Your road isn't over. It's just beginning." And before Jake could speak, before he could even blink, the man was gone. No footprints. No robe. Just the half-empty bottle of water lying in the dust. Jake looked around, dazed. His engine was no longer steaming. He climbed into his cab and turned the key. The motor started smooth as silk. The temperature gauge sat right in the middle, steady. He sat there for a long minute, staring at the road ahead. Then, with trembling hands, he reached for the old Bible on his dashboard and opened it. The page it fell to read. "Whoever gives a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in my name will certainly not lose their reward." Matthew 10 verse 42. Jake laughed, a shaky, tearful laugh that felt like sunlight. And as he shifted the rig into gear, a whisper seemed to drift through the desert wind. "Keep driving, my son. I'm riding with you." Jake didn't tell anyone about what happened that day. Who would believe him? A trucker seeing Jesus on the side of the road sounded like something out of a late-night radio show. But as he drove east, the world seemed different. The hum of the tires felt softer. The sky seemed bluer. The CB radio, usually filled with static and trucker chatter, was quiet as a church. And in that silence, Jake found himself whispering, not praying exactly, but talking. "You're still here, ain't you?" he muttered, eyes on the road. "Or was that just a desert mirage?" No answer came, but somehow he felt like someone was listening. By the time he rolled into Amarillo, the sun was setting behind the gas station canopy. Jake parked the rig, turned off the engine, and sat there, watching the orange light bleed across the sky. He thought about what the man, or whatever he was, had said, "Start by forgiving yourself." Jake had been running on guilt for years. His wife, Dana, used to call him the ghost driver, because he was never really there, even when he was home. After the miscarriage, she had begged him to quit trucking, to stay and rebuild their life together. Instead, he'd taken another job on the road, anything to avoid the look in her eyes that said, "You failed me." She left a year later. Jake never blamed her. He just buried himself in miles, pretending every truck stop was a fresh start. But every empty road just brought the same silence. Until yesterday. He got out of the cab and walked into the diner attached to the gas station. It was one of those places where the lights buzzed, the booths were cracked vinyl, and the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. He sat at the counter and ordered a burger. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, poured him coffee. "Long day?" she asked. Jake smirked. "Longest of my life." She smiled faintly. "Aren't they all?" He studied her face. There was something gentle in her tone, the way she said it like she understood too much. Her name tag said Mary. You ever see someone that shouldn't be there? Jake asked suddenly. Mary raised an eyebrow. Like a ghost. Something like that, he said, taking a sip. Someone who looks ordinary but says things nobody should know. She leaned on the counter, curious. You talkin' angels? Jake chuckled softly. Could be. Mary looked at him for a long second, then nodded slowly. My husband swore an angel came to him once. Out in the fields. Told him he'd make it through his surgery. Next week, he flatlined on the table. Doctors said it was a miracle he came back. Jake stared. Did he remember what the angel said? Mary smiled. He said the angel told him, "It's not time yet. Someone still needs you." Jake's heart skipped. That sounded a lot like something he would say. He paid for his meal, left a generous tip, and walked out to his truck. The air was cool now, the stars coming out one by one. He stood there a moment, just breathing. That's when he noticed something strange. Scrawled in the dust on his back trailer door, in letters clear as day, were the words, "Keep driving east." Jake froze. No one had been near his rig. He'd parked away from everyone. The handwriting was delicate, almost painted with a fingertip. He ran his hand across it. The dust smeared, but the words stayed faintly visible, like they'd burned into the surface. He whispered, "You're not done with me, are you?" A warm breeze blew across his face. Jake hit the road again the next morning, heading east like the message said. The radio played old gospel hymns, not by his choice. The signal kept shifting until that was all he could get. It felt like the road was alive. Every sign, every rest stop, every mile marker seemed to hum with hidden meaning. Around noon, he pulled into a lonely truck stop near the Oklahoma line. As he filled up, he noticed a man standing by the vending machines, young, scruffy, wearing a torn jacket. He looked desperate. Jake hesitated, then walked over. "You good, kid?" The man looked up. His eyes were red from crying. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Tried to get home, but my car died. Lost my job last week. I don't even know why I keep going." Jake felt a familiar ache in his chest. "Where you headed?" "Anywhere but here," the man muttered. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out the only cash he had, a crumpled $20. "Here. Get yourself a bus ticket or a meal." The man looked stunned. "You serious?" Jake shrugged. "Guess someone helped me once. Feels right to pass it on." The man took the bill, hands shaking. "Thank you. You don't know what this means." Jake smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think I do." As he walked back to his truck, a gust of wind brushed his shoulder, gentle but unmistakable. Then he heard it. Not out loud, but inside him. "You gave water. Now you've given bread. Keep going." Jake froze, goosebumps rising. "You're still here," he whispered. "Always," the voice said. For the first time in years, Jake smiled. A real smile, the kind that comes from deep down, from the place that used to be numb. That night, he stopped by a small roadside chapel he'd never noticed before. It looked abandoned, old wood, broken steeple, door hanging crooked. But the lights inside flickered like candles. He pushed the door open. It creaked loud enough to wake the dead. Inside was a single pew and a wooden cross. Dust floated in the air like snow. Jake walked up to the altar and just stood there. "I don't even know how to talk to you," he said softly. "Been a long time." The silence was thick, but peaceful. "I screwed up a lot," he continued. "I ran from everything, my wife, my faith, even myself. But if you really meant what you said, if I'm not done yet, then show me what to do." He waited. Nothing happened at first. Then the light above the altar flickered once, twice, and stayed steady. Jake felt that same warmth again, the one that burned without hurting. And a voice whispered, clear as the engine purr of his Kenworth, "Forgiveness is not found at the end of the road. It rides with you." Jake closed his eyes. Tears rolled down his face, but this time they didn't sting. When he stepped back outside, The stars were brighter than he'd ever seen. And on the chapel door, scratched faintly in the wood, were 3 words. "See Dana again." Jake froze. His ex-wife. The one he hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. He climbed into his truck, heart pounding. "All right, Lord," he said quietly. "Guess we're going home." He started the engine, turned east once more, and hit the open highway. But the road ahead wasn't just asphalt anymore. It was purpose. Jake drove through the night, the road stretching before him like a silver thread under the stars. Every hum of the tires sounded like a heartbeat, steady, alive. Somewhere beyond the horizon was his ex-wife, Dana. The thought of seeing her again made his chest tighten. He hadn't called her in nearly 10 years. Not on her birthday, not at Christmas. He'd always told himself she was better off without him, that he'd only reopen wounds. But now, the words carved on that chapel door wouldn't leave his mind. "See Dana again." He didn't know if that was a command, a suggestion, or a miracle in disguise. All he knew was that he couldn't ignore it. Not after what he'd seen. By sunrise, he was rolling into Tulsa. He stopped at a rest area to wash up. His reflection in the mirror startled him. The man staring back didn't look like the tired trucker he used to see, the one with sunken eyes and a jaw always clenched from regret. This man looked lighter. His wrinkles were still there, sure, but they didn't feel so heavy. He splashed water on his face, whispering, "Guess you really don't leave, huh?" The faucet squeaked in reply, dripping slowly, 1, 2, 3 drops. Each sound echoing like a reminder. Water, water, water. He parked outside a small suburban neighborhood a few hours later. The house looked familiar yet foreign. White siding, blue shutters, the same porch swing that used to creak when they'd sit there on summer nights. Dana's car was in the driveway. Jake sat in the cab for 10 full minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel. His stomach churned. What could he even say? "Hey, remember me, the husband who ran away from everything? Jesus says hi." He laughed dryly at the thought. Then he heard it again, the soft, warm voice from somewhere deep inside. "She thirsts too." Jake took a deep breath, climbed out of the truck, and walked to the door. His boots felt heavy as lead. He rang the bell. When the door opened, time seemed to collapse. Dana looked almost the same, a little older, a little thinner, but her eyes still that same sharp blue. Her face went pale. "Jake." "Hey, Dana." He tried to smile, but it came out awkward. "Long time." She stood frozen for a moment before saying, "It's been 9 years." "I know," he said quietly. I just wanted to see how you were doing." Her gaze softened, though guarded. "Why now?" He hesitated. "I met someone. On the road. Said I should come see you." Her brows furrowed. "A friend." Jake took a deep breath. "Someone you might have heard of." "Jesus." For a moment, she just blinked, then gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "You're joking." "I wish I was," he said. "But I saw him, Dana. He was walking barefoot in the desert. Asked me for water. Then told me things no one else could have known. About my dad. About us." She studied him carefully, looking for signs of madness. But what she saw instead was sincerity, that rare honesty she'd missed for years. "Come inside," she said finally. They sat at the kitchen table. The place smelled like coffee and cinnamon, the same scent Jake remembered from all those mornings before everything fell apart. Dana poured him a cup. "So, you saw Jesus? On the side of the road?" "Yeah." "What did he say to you?" Jake stared at the steam rising from his mug. "He said I was running from silence. That I needed to forgive myself. That I wasn't alone." She looked down at her hands. "Sounds like something you needed to hear." "I did," he admitted. "But there's more. He told me to give him water. And when I did, he said, 'That's the start of love.' I didn't understand it then. I thought it was just about being kind. But now—" He looked at her, eyes wet. "Now I think he meant something deeper. About giving life back, not just to him, but to the people we hurt, the ones we left dry." Dana's lips trembled. "You mean us?" Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah. Us. Silence filled the room. It wasn't heavy this time, just still. She sighed. You broke me, Jake. When you left after the miscarriage, I thought I'd never breathe right again. He swallowed hard. I know. I hated myself for it. Every mile I drove, I heard your voice. I tried drowning it with noise, work, anything. But that silence he talked about, it followed me everywhere. A tear rolled down her cheek. So why come back now? Because he told me to, Jake said. And because I still love you. Maybe I always did, just forgot how to show it. She wiped her eyes. You really believe that was Jesus? Jake smiled faintly. He fixed my truck without tools. Knew my name without asking. Disappeared without footprints. Yeah, I believe it. Dana chuckled softly despite herself. You always did have stories. Maybe, he said, but this one saved me. They talked for hours. About the past, about what they'd lost, about what forgiveness really meant. Somewhere between the tears and laughter, the years between them began to melt. As the sun set, Dana said, You know, there's a river near the church where I volunteer now. I go there sometimes to pray. It helps me let go. Jake smiled. Mind if I come with you? She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. The next morning, they drove together in her car, quiet at first, then slowly filling the silence with small talk and old memories. When they reached the river, the air was cool and the water shimmered like glass. They walked along the bank until Dana stopped and knelt by the water. This is where I let go of the pain, she said. Where I told God I forgave you. Jake stood behind her, the wind carrying the faint sound of flowing water, steady, eternal. He knelt beside her. Guess it's my turn then. He cupped his hands, scooped up a bit of the river, and let it pour slowly through his fingers. For every mile I wasted, for every night I ran from you. I'm sorry, he whispered. The sunlight glimmered on the surface, and for a brief moment he saw a reflection that wasn't his. The man from the desert. Jesus stood across the river, smiling. His robe fluttered gently, though there was no wind. Jake's breath caught. He nudged Dana, but when she looked, she didn't see him, only water and sky. Thank you, Jake said quietly. Jesus didn't speak this time. He simply raised a hand in blessing, and then, just like before, he was gone. The river rippled once, then went still. Dana turned to Jake. What did you see? He smiled through tears. Just a promise kept. They stayed there until sunset, watching the water glow gold. When they finally stood, Dana reached for his hand. So, what now? Jake looked up at the fading light. I think I keep driving. But this time, not to run away. To find the ones still thirsty. She squeezed his hand. Then I'll pray for every mile. He grinned. Then we'll both be on the road. That night, as Jake drove again, this time with a lighter heart, the desert stretched before him once more. He reached for the old Bible on his dashboard. It fell open to John 4 verse 14. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. He smiled, closed the book, and looked out the windshield. Somewhere out there, in every dusty town and lonely highway, people were thirsty, not for water, but for hope. And Jake Harris, the trucker who once ran from silence, had found his calling, to bring a little of that living water wherever the road would take him. He shifted gears, pressed the gas, and whispered into the wind, Let's ride, Lord. And as the sun rose over the desert, it looked for a moment like someone was walking beside his truck, barefoot, calm, smiling. Jake didn't need to look to know who it was. Because once you've given water to Jesus on the road, you never drive alone again.